Sanatana Dharma Eradication Conference. This is worse than the anti-Hindutva conference that was being organized. At least that was in the US. This is in India. What is going on in this country? Every time the DMK finds itself in a political soup, the first option of resort is to attack Hinduism, is to attack Sanatana Dharma. The Dravidian movement has always been a separatist movement. The founders of the Justice Party even go to the United Kingdom with representations to the effect freedom movement should not succeed because should it succeed, it will translate to a restoration of Brahminical rule. And these were the people who even observed the Independence Day as Black Day. Mr. E.V. Ramaswamy.
Periyar.
I won't call him Periyar. That's an epithet which is respectful. I don't wish to use that. The dirtiest part of Dravidianist politics was competition for the Brahmin woman. She was offered as the prize. The exodus of the Brahmin community from Madras Presidency and subsequently in Tamil Nadu is an unsung story with nobody having captured it properly. We may want to even ask this question, why is it that Indian history has given two different treatments, one to the Ambedkarite movement and one to the Dravidianist movement? Why do you want to have two different yardsticks or standards to be applied to two sets of movements, both of which are based on anti-Brahminism? There was this Dravidianist poet Bharatidasan who basically came out with this saying that if you see a snake and you see a Brahmin, kill the Brahmin first. The end game of Dravidianism was always destruction of Hinduism. The reason why the missionaries want the destruction of caste is not because they want an egalitarian society. It takes away that one final barrier that prevents conversion.
Namaste, Jai Hind. Welcome to another edition of ANI Podcast with Smita Prakash. Thank you for writing in with your suggestions. We realize that there are times when we get guests who do not meet with your approval. But our attempt always is to bring about a discussion on ideas and opinions that many Indians in India and some Indians who are expat Indians are confronted with almost on a daily basis. Today, our issue is on Sanatana Dharma and Dravidianism. And all this because of a comment made by a son of a chief minister of the state of Tamil Nadu, who's also a minister in his cabinet. Now, if you don't live in South India, or say you're not a Tamil, or you're not a Hindu, or you're a secular Hindu, does it matter when someone who occupies a high post says that Sanatana Dharma needs to be eradicated from India? Does a comment like that constitute hate speech or not? What is Sanatana Dharma? What is Dravidianism? And what was Udayanidhi Stalin saying? My guest today will give a historical context to Sanatana Dharma and Dravidianism and that comment. Sai, thank you so much for being part of the podcast. We do want you to demystify for our viewers and listeners what is Sanatana Dharma, what is Dravidianism, and why are these two in conflict with each other? Is it something new? Has it been there for a long time? And of course, nobody better than you. You're no stranger to the ANI podcast. For our viewers and listeners, J Sai Deepak is no stranger. He's appeared on episode 32 7 months ago. That episode has near about 4 million views on YouTube and a massive following on audio platforms too. Sai Deepak is an engineer turned litigator turned author. His two books, India That Is Bharat, Coloniality, Civilization, Constitution and India, Bharat and Pakistan, The Constitutional Journey of a Sandwich Civilization, are two voluminous, well-researched books on the Indian civilization. Sai is a much sought-after public speaker and has a massive fan following. Sai, let's begin right away with Udayanidhi's comment before we talk about the whole concept of, the larger picture about Sanatana Dharma and all. Let's just begin first with Udayanidhi's comment. I'm going to read out the comment so that viewers and listeners who don't live in India and or who don't watch TV and, who are not into social media much, don't know what the controversy is. Let's just begin with that. Now, he said there are some things which we have to eradicate and we can't merely oppose. Mosquitoes, dengue fever, malaria, corona, all these are things which we cannot oppose. We have to eradicate them. Sanatanam is also this. Eradicating, not opposing Sanatanam should be our first task. Now, he said this. Why do you think he suddenly spoke about this? I mean, there are people who live in Tamil Nadu say that it's something that his father Stalin and his grandfather Karunanidhi have said behind closed doors or in whispers. Yeah. But now it's come out in the open and it's not as if it was an off-the-cuff remark. Yeah. He clearly knew what he was saying and he's said it well thought out thing at a conference.
What conference? Sanatana Dharma Eradication Conference. What else do you expect him to speak on? He said what he said because that was the theme of the conference. People have latched on to his statement, but the fact that there is a platform that is being put together, how different is it? This is worse than the anti-Hindutva conference that was being organized or that was organized in the US a few months ago. At least that was in the US. This is in India, Bharat rather. And you have people who have managed to put together such an event. The HRC minister, Shekhar Babu of Tamil Nadu, was wearing saffron, and he was on the stage when the statement was being made. He participated in the conference. And
what does wearing saffron have to do with it?
No, the man usually sports that dress to basically indicate that he is a practicing Hindu, at least for the sake of optics. But everything that the Tamil Nadu HRC department has done, which is the Hindu Religious and Charitable Endowments department has done ever since the DMK has taken over, or even before, no government has been different in this regard, has been everything but Hindu. It's completely anti-Hindu. But for someone who presides over a department that is dedicated to Hindu religious and charitable endowments, to preside and participate in a conference that is dedicated to Sanatana Dharma eradication, what is going on in this country? Really, what is going on in this country? Replace Sanatana Dharma with any other caste, subsect, sect, sampradaya, or any other religion. What would we have on our hands? Civil and order, law and order issues. Literally, these people have gotten away with something that they should have never been allowed to.
You mean if there had been a conference on Islam and there would have been a talk about Shia or Sunni, that is the sects of Islam, and eradication of a sect would have resulted in a hate crime or a
Correct.
hate speech
and
thing.
Here an entire religion is sought to be eradicated, and it's been compared with what? Diseases, malaria, dengue, mosquitoes. What is being said here?
But they're saying that it's not eradication of a religion, but eradication of Sanatana Dharma.
So what is Sanatana Dharma according to him?
Tell me.
According to him, Sanatana Dharma is a subsect of Hinduism. Sanatana Dharma is the heart of Hinduism. To actually make this silly distinction. So you have to realize something here, and you ask me, why has he said this? What is the timing? There are quite a few issues at play here. One, 2024. Obviously, I.N.D.I.A. Right? That's the other issue. So clearly the opposition or the coalition that they've put together has this as their stated agenda, which you can see in all the statements being echoed and stated after Udayanidhi Stalin's statement. Mr. Mallikarjun Kharge said something to this effect, where he said that if Mr. Modi is back, then Sanatana Dharma will rule. Right? At least his statement is still tolerable to some extent. Then I think the Congress spokesperson in Tamil Nadu, Ms. Ramachandran, has also made a similar statement, right? Where they say, and I think the other gentleman,
Priyank Kharge.
Look at his statement that anything that has inequality at the heart of it and caste at its heart is as good as a disease, and it needs to be eradicated. These are the kind of statements that have been made. Unbelievable. See, I don't know, should I be outraged at what was said and who said it, or should I be disappointed at the fact that there's been hardly any reaction from the Hindu society? It's almost as if it's par for course. It's something that they've come to accept as a matter of daily political life in this country.
So the Congress official spokesperson who gave the press conference said that the Congress believes in Sarva Dharma Sambhavana. So there are multiplicity of views about Hinduism, and he's welcome to his view, is the general opinion.
So are we allowed to hold similar views with respect to any other faith system in this country? I'm sorry, but if this question cannot be answered in isolation. But see, the larger issue is there's one person who is missing in this entire picture. Where is the finance minister of Tamil Nadu? Or at least Mr. PTR Tyagarajan? Why has he been sidelined from the DMK IT wing? Because of the release of certain tapes, which Annamalai undertook a few months ago. Right? Ever since those revelations and that expose, the man's been completely sidelined. Prior to the elections, he basically said, we are not an anti-Hindu party. And he traced back the origins of the DMK to the antecedents, which is the Justice Party antecedents, because his ancestors were founders of the Justice Party. And he said, look at me, I sport the Kunkumam, I sport this. We are the traditional custodians and trustees of the Madurai Meenakshi temple. And we certainly look at the Panchangam before we undertake or swear in. All these statements were made. Right now, that man's completely silent. In fact, in that interview of his prior to DMK's victory, 3 people were named as Tiya Sakti, which means evil forces in Tamil. Tiya means evil, Shakti is force. Sadhguru, uh, temple campaigner and activist T.R. Ramesh, and advocate J Sai Deepak. Three of us were named as evil forces which are out to destroy the secular fabric of the great state of Tamil Nadu. This is what he said.
You don't even live in Tamil Nadu.
I don't.
Okay, Mr. Evil Sai. Okay, go on.
And when he said that, he basically said, no, we are not anti-Hindu at all. Now, I'd like to ask this gentleman, what is your position today in light of what Udayanidhi Stalin has said, who is effectively the scion of the DMK family. It's not a party, it's the DMK family. Now, he has made this statement because if you listen to Annamalai's expose, it significantly relates to who are the true beneficiaries of all those dealings.
Which dealings?
A lot of dealings have taken place.
In the financial dealings.
Financial dealings. Okay. And the question was whether there is a nexus between the person who was alluded to in those steps and the person who has recently made the statement.
You are now giving political color to this.
Every time the DMK finds itself in a political soup, the first option of resort is to attack Hinduism, is to attack Sanatana Dharma, and is to talk about social justice and egalitarianism because it has nothing else to offer when faced with pointed questions. That is part of the larger game. But coming to the more serious issue, it is consistent with Dravidianist ideology, starting from its origins and then from the origins of the Justice Party to the DK to the DMK. It's been the case all the while. It's no different.
Now demystify this for our viewers and listeners. What is the Justice Party? What is Dravida Kazhagam, that is the DK,
right,
and then the offshoots of that, and then the DMK which comes in. Also break it down for us that what is the Dravidian movement? Is it a separatist movement? When did it morph to not becoming a separatist movement? Because those of you who don't know about this, you can even Google and you can see on YouTube. Sai Deepak has spoken about Jinnah and the separatist movement and the connection with DMK. So break it all down for us now.
The Dravidian movement has always been a separatist movement. It has only chosen to cloak its fangs. The separatist aspect of its behavior is almost central to its existence, and therefore it is only biding its time. And given the kind of support that this movement has given to all sorts of anti-Bharat forces throughout its history, I have no reason to believe that it has abandoned its stripes. It hasn't. And with time, I think you will see that the fangs will be bared even better for people's consumption. See, it's impossible to think of the history or even speak of Dravidianist ideology without referring to its missionary origins. Absolutely impossible. There are enough documents, there is enough literature, scholarly literature at that, to point to the fact that the origins of the word Dravida in a racial, linguistic and religious sense must be traced to German Lutheran missionaries around 1706. And there is a specific book to this particular effect. I think it's written by Professor Sweetman. I'll even share the details of the book. And he specifically points out how they come to this country. And of course, missionaries here were not just to save our souls, but obviously the only way to save your soul is to convert. There's no other way. And therefore, their work is to understand the culture of the people. So one of the things that they choose to do is to try and look for all ways in which the religion of the South can be separated from the religion of the North.
Why?
Because they want to establish, so this is called balkanization of culture. And this is part of their acculturation process, which is unless and until you're able to unravel a particular strand from the entire fabric, it's difficult to convert that fabric, or let's say that strand, into your fold. So you have to do it one by one. So first they try to convert the Brahmins, which they find an impossible task. And you're looking at the 18th century, which was certainly impossible. Today it's possible. So when they tried doing it, they realized that what is coming in their way is the construct of Varnashrama Dharma, wherein every community and every caste relates to the larger Hindu fabric through the most proximal identity which is close to, which is its caste identity. So caste is religion for each person then, or for each group around that point of time. So they realize that I don't seem to be able to break this entire structure. Let me see if I can take the parts out. And therefore they start looking for fissures or creating fissures between two broad baskets, Brahmins and non-Brahmins. That's how the movement actually starts. And then they start looking for establishing the fact that Saiva Siddhanta is indigenous to the south and has nothing to do with the north or with the Aryan religion or the Vedic religion. These are the kind of initiatives that they undertake. Because Saiva Siddhanta is seen as the most predominant faith system in the south, you have to find ways to cleave that from the Hindu fabric or the dharmic fold. That project starts in 1700s. And they're significantly aided by the works of missionaries preceding them, such as this French missionary called Abbé Dubois, who undertakes perhaps the most comprehensive analysis of the caste structure, not the caste structure, the Varna structure, which he translates to caste structure, and he puts together a book, the copyright for which is purchased by the Governor General of the Madras Presidency, who chooses to use this for his census calculation and whatnot, and of course for other administrative reasons. From there to the point where Annie Besant's Home Rule movement is opposed by the founders of the Justice Party in cahoots with the colonial establishment on the ground, that the Congress Party is a Brahmin party, the Home Rule movement is a Brahminical movement.
Wait.
Right.
Now break this. Wait,
Right,
1 minute.
right.
So parallelly, Annie Besant's movement is starting.
I'm saying from there to the Annie Besant movement,
From
from
there, okay.
1700s to the Annie Besant movement, there is a continuity.
You're talking about 100 years,
Close to 200 years.
200 years.
At least 150 years, starting from 1706 to the Home Rule movement. Look
Okay.
at it.
Huh.
So the same argument finds a lot of purchase, because what happens is you have 3 or 4 parallel tracks being worked upon. One is the religious track by the missionaries. Then the theories that they put forth in terms of the racial distinction, the linguistic distinction, and the religious distinction between the people of the south and the so-called north is then given political traction. Now that political traction is then absorbed by the founders of the Justice Party, because they have a serious problem with the fact that less than 3.2% of the southern population of Madras Presidency, which is the Brahmin population, occupies high positions of power in the colonial establishment. So the Chettiars, the Nayars and the Mudaliars, they are the founders of the Justice Party. They have a problem with this, and they say, why should English positions, or let's say establishment positions, be appropriated by a population which is less than 3.5% of the entire population? So then they start seeking reservations and equal representation in government position. This is more or less the basis for Tamil Nadu's position till date, that we are entitled to more than 50% of the, let's say more than 50% reservation, which is the law laid down in Indira Sani, so on and so forth. So to the extent that when the Home Rule movement is going on, the founders of the Justice Party even go to the United Kingdom with representations to the effect that this movement should not succeed, because should it succeed,
The freedom movement.
the freedom movement should not succeed, because should it succeed, it will translate to a restoration of Brahminical rule. So Justice Party is the founding political body.
So this Justice Party of Tamil Nadu goes to the UK and says, don't give
Freedom to
home
India.
rule
Correct.
to India or to the Congress Party. Don't give home rule, because that will mean Brahminical
rule.
supremacy.
Supremacy.
Okay.
And these were the people who even observed the Independence Day as Black Day. They wore black shirts, which is of course the shirt
Yeah.
that they used to wear. So Justice Party as a movement gains traction significantly on its anti-Brahmin plank. There is a caste politics by then which has already found a significant amount of purchase, thanks to all the work of the colonial establishment and the preceding missionaries by then. So the most popular figures who are responsible for creating this fissure through their scholarly work, you have an administrator by the name Francis Ellis White. Then you have one missionary by the name Robert Caldwell, and then George Pope. Each of them takes the scholarship forward and mainstreams it, to the extent that the places from which they operated out of, you will see a significant Christian population. That's always been
In
the
Tamil
case.
Nadu,
In Tamil Nadu, Tirunelveli, Tenkasi, go to these places.
Okay.
Kanyakumari. That's how this, that was the experimental base. That was the breeding ground for this ideology, right? Now then, when the Justice Party wants to succeed on the basis of its anti-Brahmin plank, it certainly latches on significantly to all these theories to say Brahmins are Aryans. They are northerners. The language that they speak, Sanskrit, is closer to Hindi. Our language is different. Look at the differences in script. We are an indigenous people.
But actually, it was not so, right? Because the ancient texts were Sanskrit and they were there in Tamil Nadu.
If you talk to practitioners of the Vedic knowledge system, the belief is this. There are two grammarians, Panini and Agastya. Panini is responsible for Sanskrit. Agastya is responsible for Tamil. The Tamil structure is based on what is called Agatyam, which is nothing but upabranch or a corruption of Agastyam. Okay. Now, going by their logic, Agastya was a North Indian. So Tamil has to be credited to someone who's come specifically down the Vindhyas for the purposes of civilization. Right? What is the belief? There is a fantastic sutra. It's called Maheshwarani Sutra. And there, the belief is that Lord Shiva's Damru has two sides. And the movement of the Damru and the sound that emanates from it gives rise to all the languages. The sounds, the primordial sounds which give birth to languages come from the Damru. So the belief is that one side has Om in Sanskrit and the other has Om in Tamil.
Okay.
This is the belief. Now, going by this, what is the logic here then? So, the only way that you can actually break this structure and this philosophy is by saying that Saiva Siddhanta itself is native to the South. Okay, it's got nothing, or it's indigenous to the South and it's got nothing to do with the North. The larger cultural continuity, the fact that Cholas and all the ruling empires and dynasties of the country, of the Tamil kingdom, so to speak, what is called Tamilagam, would have Chaturvedi Mangalam, which means at the heart of the city would be established Agraharas for Brahmins, and they would be allowed to surround the temple as the first garland, hence Agraharam. And that's how they would establish it. They had no antipathy towards Brahmins, and there is no recordal of any caste discrimination in that scripture in stone inscriptions. So all that epigraphic literature, all that archaeological literature, everything is sidelined because this invented theory has to gain traction. And that was mainstreamed by the colonial establishment, unfortunately with active support from Indians.
Okay, so let's get back now to what happened about the separatist tendencies. One was the Home Rule, opposing the Home Rule. What else did the Justice Party do, which is the parent organization of the...
So from Justice Party, you will come to the DK, from there you come to the DMK.
Right, so what else did the Justice Party do which was separatist in nature?
So you have to realize that you're looking at a period when communal electorates was already introduced by the Minto-Morley reforms. Based on the Shimla Declaration or the Shimla Delegation of the Muslim League in 1906. Now that sets a precedent for a lot of groups who want to do two things. Take benefit of separate electorates, but if you have to seek the benefit of separate communal electorates, you have to establish the fact that you are also a distinct community in itself. Right? So who does it? The birth of Khalistan is not of 1980s. It happens around this period. Because by then, the Sikh identity is significantly cleaved away from the Hindu identity. This happens in one part of the country, in the north of Vindhyas, where the colonial establishment undertakes a systematic exercise of de-Hinduizing everything that pertains to the Sikh religion. And say you're a separate panth altogether, you are not part of this fold. Unfortunately, that finds traction as well. And they start asking for separate electorates there, only to be rejected later. And they continue to make this efforts.
Who rejected it?
The Punjab Council, the State Council rejected it. Then of course, in the South...
That was not a Brahminical conspiracy or a Sanatan conspiracy to reject it, or was it?
No, so there was no such conspiracy. At that point, there was a significant division even between British authorities as to whether this particular community or group can be treated as a separate community altogether. Okay, so the antipathy between the Sikh identity and the Hindu identity must be traced to this period to a large extent. From there, you come to the South. And in the South, the non-Brahmins of the Madras Presidency claim that they must be treated as a separate community altogether. And it's not possible to do so unless and until you de-Hinduize these identities significantly.
And geographically or politically, Madras Presidency is not the Tamil Nadu of today.
It was massive.
It was going up till Orissa and
Odisha bordering Bengal.
Yeah, bordering.
Right? So you had
people who don't know about, I mean, the youth of today,
Right.
who are sitting, they probably think, "Humko kya? We are not Tamilians," not realizing that originally, even if you lived in Andhra Pradesh or Orissa of today,
Correct.
you were also part of Madras Presidency.
That's why the word Madrasi is used, because Madras connotes so many regions.
Yeah, I become a Madrasi too then.
For all practical purposes.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, of course, that there was no pejorative sense in which it was used
Correct,
at some
yes.
point. Of course it was. But nevertheless, the fact is all of these regions were clubbed together as part of one presidency. Hence the word Madrasi. That's where it comes from.
Yeah.
Now, when this request is made, so there is a fantastic book, I think, by G.K. Singh on constitutional law, which captures the entire history of this period right until the 1935 Act, the Government of India Act of 1935. And he shows in clear detail how these representations were made repeatedly. And the Congress would say, should you recognize this, then even if there is a possibility of a parley between the British establishment and the Congress, we are off the table, we are not going to do this. Okay? So they said we will not entertain this kind of a nonsense at all under any circumstances because it cleaves the society. Second, the Justice Party is being propped up as the competition to the Congress Party in the South with the support of the colonial establishment. Okay? So around this period is when there is a greater movement or a greater emphasis to somehow find an indigenous religious justification which warrants the grant of a separate communal electorate for people from the South who are non-Brahmins. So this is exclusively not for people from the South, all people from the South. It's exclusively for the non-Brahmin communities.
How were they supposed to do this?
I'll explain that.
Yeah.
So their point was that considering the disproportionate representation of Brahmins in the colonial establishment, we are a disenfranchised lot. And this discussion happens in the British Parliament also, saying, what do we do of this representation? To which there are quite a few members of the British establishment who say that this is a most mischievous representation for the simple reason that all these people are landed communities with extensive wealth, with extensive political influence, with extensive social influence as well. So for them to ride on the backs of the communal electorates of the Muslims is extremely mischievous. And for them to gang up together against a population which has no other means of survival, which has no land, which are landless destitutes, which is the Brahmins, also reeks of bullying. That's the language that's used in the British Parliament there. Okay? Now, all this while, Mr. E.V. Ramaswamy was originally a member of the Congress.
Periyar.
I won't call him Periyar. That's an epithet which is respectful. I don't wish to use that. He remains E.V. Ramaswamy Naidu. E.V. Ramaswamy Nayakar. That's his name. So that's how I will refer to him. So this gentleman, who was a member of the Congress, chooses to come out because he sees this as a coterie of Brahmins who have come together, and largely he sees the Congress as a North Indian conglomeration of Brahmins.
Though he's still in the Congress at that time.
Correct, he was still in the Congress. And it's funny that you then see that similar allegations are subsequently hurled against the BJP when it seeks to enter the South. Right? So the parallels are not that different. Or they're not that dissimilar. Now, when he starts what is known as the DK is more or less a social organization. It doesn't see itself as a political organization. It wants to be in a position to invest in the society through its ideology and try and convert them to its belief system. What is it? One, there is no God. That's the stated position. But that exclusively applies to the Hindu gods alone. Second, Brahmins are Aryans. And Brahmins are single-handedly responsible for taking away your jobs. They live off the fat of the land. And apart from the study of the Vedas, they never contribute to anything else. They are incapable of taking up any kind of work that requires the use of physical labor. If you read Nazi literature about Jews of that particular period, and you compare it with the DK's literature and the DMK's literature, which is used in the context of Brahmins, you will not find it any different whatsoever, at all.
Who are the Jews in this?
The Brahmins. And they go to the extent of saying that apparently, I think there is some literature to this effect, that they even seek to establish some kind of an ethnic relationship between the Jews and Brahmins to justify all their hate-filled literature. That is a systematic ideology that was pushed with active support from the missionaries. Not just that.
E.V. Ramaswamy is an upper caste person who...
Kannada speaking.
three languages.
I don't know whether it's Kannada or Telugu.
Yes,
don't know.
It's Kannada, Tamil, and Telugu.
Right.
So he speaks three languages. Upper caste person.
Right.
He feels persecuted when he goes to Kashi.
Right.
And he turns against.
He was like the white of those times who feels he's an African American.
Okay. So he feels a sense of persecution and he feels that this is what is happening. I think there's some case that he went to a chowdhury
He
or
goes to a
something
chowdhury
and
he's denied access there.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, in all these places,
Yeah.
all chowdhuries are significantly caste-based.
Yeah.
So even if a Brahmin were to go to some other chowdhury, he wouldn't have been given access. It's not as if only non-Brahmins are denied access in a Brahminical place.
Yeah.
It works both ways. Casteism in this country has always been a two-way
Correct.
street.
So it was some kind of a persecution that it was a personal experience that
Now,
turned
we don't know
him,
if that's a reality or if it's
not,
hagiography.
yeah,
We
nobody
don't
knows.
know.
So he turns atheist. At some point of time, he turns atheist.
Right.
Now, the Justice Party, which is the parent organization of today's DMK,
Right.
They brought into them people who were atheists, Muslims, Christians, everybody. It was a parent.
That's their claim.
That's their claim.
Because, see, the idea is that you need to form a coalition which is exclusive of the Brahmins.
So the only criteria was that
Anti-Brahminism.
Anti-Brahminism.
Because
how do you already explained now that how that Khalistan thing? How do they find a chord which is resonant with Jinnah asking for a separate land for Muslims?
So you see, when this conversation happens, they are basically saying that they want a Dravidistan. Okay.
Is it gaining popularity in Tamil Nadu or Madras presidency at this stage?
See, in the political circles, it is kosher. Okay. But if you go down to the street and you talk to the average citizen, they know for a fact that they are living in an extremely corrupt regime, and which only is interested in keeping them away from joining the Indian mainstream. And the best example for that in recent times has been the exclusivist treatment that Tamil Nadu has sought in the context of NEET.
No, I'm talking about the 40s right now when
Right.
they speak with Jinnah. Let's stay with
Right.
the period at that time. Was
Right.
it gaining traction among the
Significantly.
people?
Huge,
It was
huge.
Okay.
You see, one is, I think, when you choose to gang up against a community which has no muscle, so to speak, which doesn't even have land, and the only thing that it is in a position to command is the respect of the people, thanks to the social position it has consistently held. It's very difficult to prevent the tide. And two, you're also offering a lot of things in return. One of the things that was also offered, and this is the dirtiest part of Dravidinist politics, was competition for the Brahmin woman. She was offered as the prize. If you read that literature, you'll be surprised at the language that's used. The filthiest of words being used and connotations being used. And the manner in which temples have even been described as places where people just go to ogle at each other. Where women go to see other men and men go there to see their women being groped by others. This is the language that's actually used by E.V. Ra in his literature when he speaks of temples. There is also enough literature to show how entire, localities were exterminated of Brahmins through sexual attacks. Around that period and subsequently.
1940s.
Yes. Before the DMK came into existence and after particularly.
I'm digressing, but do you think the attack on Jayalalitha in the
Without
house?
a doubt. What do you think was the language that she was referred to on the floor of the house? I am not going to stand up for Jayalalitha here given her treatment of Kanchi Shankaracharya. Okay? However, it remains a fact that she was significantly targeted for two reasons. One, that she was a woman, and two, that she was a Brahmin woman. Particularly an Iyengar from Mysore, therefore the constant hint and suggestion that she is not a Tamilian by any yardstick, by any conventional yardstick. Well, they accepted M.G. Ramachandran, who's from Sri Lanka and who was a Malayali. I don't know what to say. And perhaps we should also start asking questions as to what was the mother tongue of the deceased ancestor of Udayanidhi Stalin. Was it Tamil or Telugu? We don't know. Right?
Okay, but we were talking about the Brahmin woman.
Right.
So it is possible that a lot of the attack on Jayalalitha
100%.
was because of
Hugely casteist. Heavily casteist. See, I haven't come across. The persecution of Kashmiri Pandits is well known. And particularly because it involves another community, it's even well known. And the exodus was for people to watch and see. It was physical. The exodus of the Brahmin community from Madras Presidency and subsequently in Tamil Nadu is an unsung story with nobody having captured it properly. Nobody has an idea as to what has happened. How they've been consistently persecuted. People can call me a Manwadi, a Brahminical stooge, or whatever they wish to, but this story has to be said. When you're comfortable listening to my story on the partition, on several other issues, then surely I'm entitled to present facts even on this aspect, because this is one of the most uncomfortable, nastiest aspects of Bharatiya history.
Which has been normalized, right?
Normalized completely in the name of social justice.
Like, just to digress from it, recently I was speaking to somebody who knows Tamil Nadu politics, and I was just mentioning that, what if Nirmala Sitharaman or S. Jaishankar were to contest, a Lok Sabha polls in 2024? Can they do that in Tamil Nadu? They said no.
Impossible.
Yeah.
Impossible. I'll give you an example from my own fraternity without dropping names. Someone who hails from the north of Vindhyas with a fair complexion, but is known for erudition, scholarship, patience, dignity and integrity, subsequently comes to occupy a certain position in the justice dispensation system of Tamil Nadu. The tenure was made miserable, absolutely miserable, thanks to the surname, thanks to the complexion, and because of the fact that he hails from the north of Vindhyas. This is the extent to which separatism and regional chauvinism has been entrenched in the DNA of Tamil Nadu politics by Dravidianism. That's a cancer which is worse than Kashmiri separatism, because Kashmiri separatism at least has an AK-47 in hand, so it's clear. Dravidian separatism doesn't wield AK-47, it wields the pen. And it uses pop culture, theatre. That's how it is studied.
Poetry, right?
Yes,
Karunanidhi.
that's how they've operated. And the venom that they've spewed and normalized, because they have normalized hatred through the pen, so people don't understand how visceral it actually is on the streets. And the kind of incestuous nexus that they've established with the jihadi ecosystem in the south is unbelievable. And the evangelical ecosystem, the radical evangelical ecosystem in the south. It's almost as if the south has become a breeding ground for rampant conversions. We don't even talk about it. From Andhra Pradesh to Tamil Nadu. But the cancer certainly started in Tamil Nadu in Madras Presidency.
In one of your talks, you had talked about Dravidistan and the role played by Jinnah. I asked you that earlier also. How did it come up, and at what stage did the Justice Party find some common chord with Jinnah?
See, the common enemy around that point was the Congress. And since it had already been given this Hindu Brahminical hue, although the Congress never saw itself as Hindu party of all the parties, it has never seen itself as a Hindu party. That's the fact. So on the negotiating table, Jinnah has very clear demands which go well beyond what was already given in the Minto-Morley reforms. In 1940, I think it's in the Kanchipuram session, when the call for Dravidistan is passed, or this resolution is passed by, of course, members of the South. Kanchipuram being selected, imagine of all the places, the place where the Shankaracharya Matha is actually there, Kanchi Matha is there, that is used for this call. The Congress says that we will not sit at the negotiating table with Jinnah if he is going to support the call for Dravidistan.
Why? Who says that?
The Congress says this.
But why?
Because they're saying that this translates to balkanization of the country, and we have no interest in treating members of the Hindu fold at par with members of the Muslim fold. Because at least there's a clear religious divide, and we understand that divide even if we don't agree with it.
So who do you think said that? Was it Patel, Nehru, Rajgopalachari?
See, around the 1940, I would say that obviously by then, from 1920 August onwards, Gandhi was calling the shots. Quite a few people, of course, Rajagopalachari would have certainly said it. I don't remember the exact individuals involved in this, but as an establishment, this was their institutional position. Their organizational position was, we will not support it. Annie Besant was a vocal, vociferous opponent of this. She never agreed to this.
Okay.
Because she was also, you have to realize, a deep student of Bharatiya history and Sanskriti. She is one of the founding members of the Theosophical Society of India, which is based out of Adyar, right? That was used against her, saying she's part of a Brahminical clique. So when the Congress refuses to sit at the negotiating table and says that we will not entertain this particular concept, now Jinnah being Jinnah, he's more interested in securing the rights of Muslims and to secure for them whatever he believes is the right of primacy or importance than supporting the Dravidianists. So Ambedkar on the one hand and the proponents of Dravidistan, both of them are abandoned by Jinnah. Because he is saying, I am interested in supporting your cause provided it helps my cause. If you remember in the last podcast, I specifically said how the unity for the Khilafat movement was,
yes.
Right, was a matter of convenience. Yeah. That's the same situation here.
But that was the other way around.
Right.
It was a matter of convenience for for Gandhi.
Gandhi as well.
Yeah.
So here, when they realize that if he were to tag along with the other two, then the Congress will not even listen to his point of view. He drops them fully. And at that point, these guys realize that it's not going to work.
Justice Party.
The Justice Party. So they undertake this activity on their own. They continue to ask for separate treatment. See, there is another historical
Ask from whom? From the British?
From the British as well as from the Congress establishment that we must be given special treatment.
Okay.
See, there are two reasons here. For the British man who came to this country, what was his first port of exposure to Bharat? Bengal. Plassey, Buxar, those are the places. Madras is slightly later because the first colonizer of the south was not the British man but the Portuguese. Madras was in fact, for all practical purposes, you can say was founded by the Portuguese as we know it today. A lot of churches there were established by the Portuguese. A lot of temples were destroyed by the Portuguese. The Kapalishwara temple, which you see in Mylapore today, its original place of location was the St. Thomas Basilica. And you will find a hoarding clearly saying that this is where it was. The shivling had to be transferred because, according to the Puranas, the shivling is on the beach. But the temple currently is not on the beach because it had to be shifted. Okay, so that board still stands outside the Mylapore temple. So the point I was making is the British man, when he comes to the south from Bengal, he's asking himself, how can this be part of the same culture when there are such clear, stark differences from language to speaking habits to whatnot? Okay, so when they come to Bharat, the diversity leads them to believe that it is an artificial synthetic creature that's been put together. There is otherwise no commonality or unity underlying this diversity.
Which even in medieval India, the Muslims were also, the Muslim invaders were also saying that there is no homogeneity.
There is no homogeneity here. This does not sit within the definition of what constitutes a nation. So that's why they had this problem. Apart from that, when you go to the south, it's hot as hell, right? So Madras was a punishment posting. So usually
for the colonialists.
Which is why they would have
let's just specify, not for the Indian Foreign Service. Okay.
So these guys would then establish places like Ooty, Kodaikanal because they need their hill stations. Now, when they come here, they realize that this is perhaps not the place that they want to be. So obviously, there is a certain degree of neglect that Madras receives at the hands of the colonial establishment. Okay, so that's one. Two, there is also a homegrown or indigenous call, thanks to the missionary work, saying that we are different. So there is neglect from the colonial establishment coupled with a homegrown feeling of separatism. Both of them contribute to special treatment being the norm as far as the south is concerned, or particularly for the Tamil state. Okay, this has always been the case. As this goes along, you will see that once you inch closer to the independence movement, there are two parallel movements going on. One is the Congress movement led by Rajaji and others, and Annie Besant. And parallelly, the Justice Party's constant attempts at somehow, protecting the status quo and repeated entreaties to the British establishment to stay back. Now, it is surprising that the descendants of this particular party, with its history of British loyalism, question every other organization about their contributions to the independence movement. People have never asked what is the contribution of the Dravidianist movement to independence, if at all. In fact, their contribution has been to the negative. They've always wanted India to be a British dominion with absolutely no role for autonomy whatsoever. At one point, the missionaries who were guiding and enlightening the ideologues of the Dravidianist movement, they wanted destruction of caste altogether to be included in the manifesto of these organizations.
There's nothing wrong in that?
No, hold on. The reason why the missionaries want the destruction of caste is not because they want an egalitarian society. It takes away that one final barrier that prevents conversion. Because caste was seen as a huge stumbling block to conversion from Hinduism to Christianity. Okay? So those who see caste as an evil institution, its nature and how you have seen it has changed with time. And
Yeah, because nowadays what people would think is that because of casteism, conversions are happening.
correct. So that happened later. Initially, caste was a barrier. And then the missionaries realize, if I were to actually break this barrier, I get an entire caste group on my side. Okay? So there are two phases during this period.
So that non-Brahmin is the caste group you're talking
Exactly.
about. Okay.
So they realize that in the first instance, this is the institution that stands as the barrier in the way of conversion, particularly because you're not able to get the Brahmins. So then they decide to go to the next level, which is just, since I can't convert the Brahmin, let me drive a wedge between the Brahmins and the non-Brahmins, and then see if there is a way of harvesting more souls from the non-Brahminical fold.
Harvesting souls from the non-Brahminical. Okay.
And you will see this significantly in southern parts of Tamil Nadu, where there are entire groups which have converted. Okay? Groups which otherwise do not have any basis to claim that they were persecuted. Groups which have been either landed or mercantile. And people who perhaps actually resort even to downstream casteism further.
This is, I'm digressing, but this is something that was seen in Southeast Asia also, isn't it? It's not just in, like if you were to see in Indonesia,
Right.
if you were to see in Philippines, if you were to see in Burma, erstwhile Myanmar,
Right,
Burma.
right.
Even in these places, this is what was happening, where it was, because there are Tamilians even in these areas,
Right,
right?
right.
They had gone for various reasons, not
Singapore.
to convert Singapore.
Right.
You're seeing that, and you see Lee Kuan Yew also saying that people came in, but the Chinese civilization and the Indian civilization did
Correct,
not. You've
correct.
seen that famous speech of Lee Kuan Yew in which
Correct.
he says
I
that
think he's addressing the students there.
he's addressing students, and he says that it withstands that kind of change. Anyway, let me come back to that bit about, when you talked about separatism of the Justice Party and then the DK.
Right.
What is the connection between now the DMK with this whole Tamil Elam bit?
So this DMK is the political offshoot or political successor of the DK. Okay, so one is a cultural organization, the other is a political organization, or whatever parallels you wish to draw with any other organization, there it stands. Now, DMK starts making its efforts to gain power, and the first time it manages to gain power, I think, is in 1967, in the elections of 1967. And I think the then Congress Chief Minister was Bhaktavatsalam, who loses to the DMK. And I think
Congress.
Congress.
Yeah.
And it was his statement, and I think it was a prophetic statement, that cancer has infected Tamil Nadu. Okay, he made that
And
statement.
the Congress has never come to power since
Ever
then.
since. It hasn't. Because Dravidianism has become the norm. All the parties that you see which have some kind of say in Tamil Nadu politics are some kind of MK or Dravida Munnetra Kazhagam, MDMK, ADMK, this DMK. This is always there because Dravidianism has to be paid obeisance to if you want to survive in Tamil Nadu politics. And for the first time, I think under Annamalai that's changed. That barometer has changed significantly.
Annadurai also was the same then.
Yes, 100%. He was, of course, a DMK ideologue. He couldn't have been any different. His difference of opinion with Periyar is single-handedly responsible for the DMK being formed because EVR specifically wanted to limit himself to societal activity, whereas these people were interested in being in politics and securing power because it was their belief that you cannot bring about social change without having power, and therefore it's important to gain access to power. So from the DK to the DMK, that journey is rife with regular marches, with Hindu deities being garlanded with slippers, and regular speeches being aired on in writing as well as in their election speeches, where Hindu gods would be denigrated. The unfortunate reality is there is also a significant degree of overlap between Ambedkarite movement and the Dravidian movement. It's not as if they have never collaborated with each other. To a significant extent, they have. And if you were to draw parallels between the two, the fact that they saw the Dalits, the Bahujans, and the Muslims as forming one block, and the Savarna Hindus as forming another block, is a certain parallel. It is a certain comparison. So we may want to even ask this question, why is it that Indian history has given two different treatments, one to the Ambedkarite movement and one to the Dravidinist movement? That's an uncomfortable question for people to ask. Why do you want to have two different yardsticks or standards to be applied to two sets of movements, both of which are based on anti-Brahmanism, both of which ultimately led to calls for, or let's say, which have denigrated Hinduism significantly? There are quite a few speeches of the icons of both movements which have targeted Sri Ram, Sri Krishna, so on and so forth. Their character has been called into question. They've been accused of being regressive, patriarchal, and whatnot. All sorts of things have been said.
In fact, this Periyar, when he talked about it, so it's not as if what Udaynidhi has said is something new.
It's not new.
Not historical, because he said when he talks about the Congress and the Dravida movement, and he says
Right.
that the first would be the destruction. First thing that should be done is the destruction of the Congress party.
Right.
Then the second is the destruction of the Hindu religion.
Right.
And the third is the destruction and the domination of Brahmins.
Right.
And this would automatically happen if the first two tasks are completed.
Are these positions any different from Dr. Ambedkar's position in annihilation of caste? Exactly what he said. That the only way you get to annihilate caste is by annihilating Hindu Dharma, because at the end of the day, Varnashrama Dharma and Sanatana Dharma or Hindu Dharma are inseparable. And you cannot protect one without destroying the other, or you can't destroy one without destroying the other. There is an extremely dual treatment that Indian history and Indian political discourse has meted out to the same opinion coming from two different people. Perhaps the striking distinction is that one sought secession, the other sought special treatment within the constitution through reservations.
When did that desire for secession stop in the Dravid movement and in Tamil Nadu?
Largely because of the iron treatment meted out by both Nehru as well as Indira Gandhi subsequently.
The amendment to the constitution.
Not just amendment to the constitution, even the president's rule being imposed in Tamil Nadu for some of their activities, especially once the DMK came to power. These are instances which force them to change their track or to change their tack without actually changing the end goal. So the secessionist aspect of their entire movement was pushed to the back burner.
69.
And it would translate to support for extraterritorial Tamil interests such as the LTTE. Because here is another body that is capable of speaking for establishment of a separate Tamil Elam. So why don't we revive this interest in the garb or under the garb of supporting a Tamil interest in Sri Lanka? Why is it that the DMK enjoyed such a bonhomie and camaraderie with the LTTE is a question that has to be asked. In that context, despite my strong disagreements with the former or the deceased Ms. Jayalalitha, she was, I would say, openly, bluntly, candidly patriotic, nationalistic. She'd say, I am never going to support this under any circumstances. One of the reasons that she had to start wearing that bulletproof vest was because of the threats that she was receiving from
Under
the LTTE.
that cape, yes.
Correct. So that she had to. These are the kind of antecedents that saddle the history of the DMK or the Dravidinist movement. It needs to be studied in greater detail.
I want to read out this letter that Nehru had written to Kamaraj, who was then the Chief Minister of Madras. And he was writing about Periyar, and he said, I do hope you will take adequate
lunatic.
notice.
Right.
And he writes in 1957, this is almost more than 10 years before the crackdown on the DMK, in which he tells that EVR should be put in a lunatic asylum,
Right.
and let his perverted mind be treated out there.
I think it's also somehow convenient to hold the Congress alone responsible for this. Since I belong to no organization, I can speak my mind independently.
Sure.
Even nationalist political parties seem to be singing praises, or rather singing pains in praise of Periyar or E.V. Ramaswamy these days. That has happened. I've seen that happen. Under the name of political compulsion, all that is anti-Hindu and hence anti-Bharat is being normalized, and that should have never happened. So, while the Congress must be held significantly for joining hands with this kind of an entity, subsequently, it remains a fact that non-Congress options have done that as well. National political parties other than the Congress have done that as well. There are statements to this effect. Because they believe that it's not possible for them to open their account in the state of Tamil Nadu without actually paying obeisance to this figure. Who all are you going to pay obeisance to? everyone who's contributed to the fall of the civilization or everyone who's prayed for the fall of the civilization? So what are you going to sacrifice at the altar of political dharma? See, it's like this. Assume for a moment that it becomes impossible to win an election in the Kashmir Valley in the future without paying obeisance to Gilani. Will you do it? Will you do it? You wouldn't, because he wielded the gun and he spoke openly. What did this person do, or what did his ideological successors do except for wielding the gun? They have wielded the knife, for God's sakes. And they have exterminated communities. Vikram Sampath spoke beautifully of the massacre of Maharashtrian Brahmins post Gandhi's assassination in Maharashtra. And the active participation of several communities, all of them, several groups, all of them Hindu groups, in this massacre. Nobody has spoken of the treatment meted out over decades to the Tamil Brahmin community or even the Telugu Brahmin community. The divide that you see, or let's say the linguistic chauvinism that is prevalent even within the South, is significantly a product of Dravidinist chauvinism and separatism, where it chooses to say Telugu is more Sanskritized, so let it be treated as a separate group altogether. But Tamil must gain supremacy because in the hierarchy of languages, if Sanskrit rules the roost in the north, Tamil shall rule the roost in the south. This is the kind of special treatment that they have arrogated to this. I don't say that Tamil pride is bad. I don't say that there should be no pride for this language. It's one of the oldest languages, not the oldest language. It is one of the oldest languages, and it has its own fantastic literature. You don't need to call it the oldest language just to pander to Dravidinist sentiments. And whoever is doing this, whichever position they occupy, they are not helping the cause of Bharatiya integrity and let's say unity by constantly pandering to the ego of the Dravidinists by calling it the oldest language. There is a lot more to celebrate about Tamil. There is a lot to be praised about, but don't pander to this particular sentiment. And you're doing this, you're being penny wise and pound foolish.
And this pro-Tamil movement also gets a lot of energy with this anti-Hindi movement that
because
happens.
it's seen as the direct successor of Sanskrit. The script doesn't really help because it's the Devanagari script. How each of this has played a huge role. I think in one of that speeches that you mentioned, I clearly pointed out how all of Indian languages were ultimately traced to the sons of Noah.
Yeah, which is bizarre. So but tell us about this.
3 of the sons of Noah apparently are responsible for Sanskrit, and the final son, the unfortunate son who's abandoned, is the son who's responsible for all the Dravidian languages. Dravida ultimately is a word that comes from Sanskrit, which effectively translates to peninsula, a landed body surrounded by water on 3 sides. That is Dravida. Why is this important? We have the concept of the Dravidian Brahmins and Gaudiya Brahmins, which is those Brahminical Gotras who are from the south and those Brahminical groups who are from the north. So it has always been a geographical connotation, not a racial, not a racist, not an ethnic or a linguistic connotation. But the use of Dravida in an ethnocentric sense was done by a German missionary for the very first time, and then subsequently Robert Caldwell takes it forward. It is so unfortunate that we continue to peddle this nonsense to our own detriment. Just compare. So there's a brilliant network. Whenever you're on YouTube, please watch it. It's called the African News Network. How beautifully contemporary African leaders are examining the colonial influence on their contemporary realities and why they speak in English. Why is it that Africa needs more passports within its own continent for people to move from one part to another? Just watch it. And you'll ask yourself what an enlightening conversation Africans are indulging in with respect to the colonial past. And the very same discussion cannot be had properly in this country because you'll be accused of being a Hindutva fascist, this and that. I said this even before. The European colonizer and his Christian urge to reform people and to harvest souls has had an influence across continents, Bharat being no exception. When the rest of the world and all these affected, continents are having a free and open discussion, why is Bharat stifling this discussion in the name of secularism? Why is it stifling this in the name of historical revisionism? This is not revisionism. These are documented facts coming from even scholars from abroad. I can give you at least 3 or 4 names. Eugene Urshik, a journalist born in 1969 in Kodaikanal, captured clearly the missionary hand in cultivating the political ideology of Dravidianism. Professor Sweetman says this as much. Nicholas Dirks speaks of caste. I point this out in so many lectures. One of the finest books written on the subject, which people must read, is authored by Sri Rajiv Malhotra and Arvinda Neelakantan, Breaking India, where they put all of this together in a beautiful fashion. I have my disagreements with a lot of people, but if a work is worthy of attention and it needs to be read, I will certainly push it regardless of who writes it. And this is something that must be read. People should read this.
Sai, it's we were talking about 1969 and the parties with whether the DMK, the AIDMK. Now it's now close to what, 50 years?
Right.
Since the Dravid parties have been there. Essentially, they talk about anti-casteism.
Right.
More than, we can talk about various things.
Right.
Today, Udaynidhi has talked about Sanatan.
Right.
But it's anti-casteism, basically, right? But if they have been in power for so many years in one form or the other,
They haven't been able to do anything.
why have they not
You
been
know
able
what?
to
There's
eliminate?
literature to show that ever since the rise of Dravidist ideology, the number of cases where the establishments or the settlements of the SCSTs have been put to or set to fire, and the kind of atrocities that they've been subjected to by people who claim to fight in their name. So here's what happens. The strategy has always been this, whether you call it the communist movement or social justice movement, anywhere. A lot of landed groups which have a certain sense of antipathy towards the non-landed priestly community choose to use the shoulder of the actually affected parties to fire their bullets from. Right? In the name of social justice. Now, what social justice? Who has benefited at the end of this? Let us actually undertake a clear study of what kind of benefits have been apportioned by the Indian state for the welfare of the SCST communities in Tamil Nadu, and how many of them have benefited to what extent. Has the rise of Dravidianism translated to reduction in violence against these groups? Who is responsible for the commission of this violence? People who are less than 2.5% of the population in Tamil Nadu today, who've never wielded the weapon, which is the Tamil Brahmins, or others. Let's have this conversation. It's mighty convenient to constantly paint the Brahmin as this venomous snake. In fact, he was the one to come out. I think there was this Dravidinist poet, Bharatidasan, who basically came out with this saying that if you see a snake and you see a Brahmin, kill the Brahmin first. This reeks and smacks of Nazi propaganda. And Nazis used the television, or let's say the movies, and so was the case with the Dravidianists as well. There's another thing that you must ask yourself. Okay, you want to talk about egalitarianism, equality. Fine. Why do you want to remove caste names only from roads? Remove it altogether from each of your ministers' names. And let's do away with reservations altogether. Why don't you have this conversation? Equality should mean no reservation in your dense head. Because that's your approach to equality otherwise.
Sai, it's over 100 years since the Dravid movement. Now, they wanted to eradicate casteism. Sanatan was one of the words, but then they wanted to eradicate casteism. DMK is in power right now. Why is it that casteism is not over and it's still practiced, and there is now a new form of casteism which is coming up? So here I'm reading out from an article in the Indian Express. It says, English media, it says, in this belt in southern Tamil Nadu, known for violent caste conflicts between OBCs and Dalits, these wristbands are markers that tell children who's a friend, who isn't. Though there are no written rules, students usually know their colors by the time they reach high school. It's red and yellow for Tevars, blue and yellow for Nadars, saffron for Yadavs, all socially and politically powerful Hindu communities that come under the most backward classes category, MBCs. While students of the Dalit community of Pallars wear wristbands in green and red, and Arundatiyars also wear green and red, Dalits wear green, black and white. So my question, Sai, is that after 100 years since the Dravidian movement, why is caste-based slavery of sorts still prevalent?
Heart of the social justice movement should have translated to being a paradise of social justice.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened, right? Okay, I'll explain how fundamentally anti-scientific, historically stupid the entire myth of Dravidianism is. So, around what we call Avaniyatam, which is Upakarma Day, in Shravana Mas, what we do, so Brahmins change their Janayu. Okay? It's not a caste mark. First of all, across the board, several castes wear the Janevu. It's not just the Brahmin. It's never been the sole preserve of the Brahmin. Every community which has been deemed as a Dvija has worn it.
Twice born.
Yes. So, when I was doing my mechanical engineering, the one who was teaching foundry to me, so foundry is where you actually make molds and dies and whatnot. It requires a lot of physical labor. That man basically said, you Iers can't do this. We also wear Punal. Look at us. We also do it. I said, sir, where is this coming from? No, he said, see, I'm a Vishwakarma. I wear it, but even I can do this. So people in each of those fields, you'll see pictures in the British period of potters and whatnot wearing the Punal. Why is this important? Because around the Upakarma day, which is when you change the Janevu, every year the DMK makes it a point to come out with a caricature of a pig wearing the Janevu. How does this not attract Section 295A? How does this not attract hatred for a particular group? In the name of social justice, how long are you going to target and come after this one particular community? Across the board, this has happened in this country. I am open to all the hate mail that's going to come towards me for having said this. I am open to it. I'll swallow the poison. I have no problems. Someone has to do the Vishpan. I'll be the person to do it. I have no problems. But there is hypocrisy in Indian political, social, and caste discourse across the board on this particular subject. This needs to be spoken of. It's finally important. People are happy when I speak of decoloniality as long as it supports them and helps them. Chalo, I'll use decoloniality in a different sense now. I'll talk about this as well.
What about Bihar and Uttar Pradesh? They've had caste-based parties.
Right.
Is it different from Tamil Nadu?
The impression that Dravidinist ideologues want to give to the rest of the world is that the South and especially Tamil Nadu is a paradise of development, is a paradise of caste, lack of casteism, so on and so forth. I am sorry, that is not the case. From the film industry to every possible industry, there is not a single sphere of activity which is untouched by caste. And politics of Tamil Nadu is certainly caste entrenched. They don't get to hold this moral high ground with anybody else at all. When they constantly say, you should see these arrogant, absolutely abysmal posts on Twitter where they say, you North Indians, this and that, you come from the cow belt, you come to Tamil Nadu, we are this and that. What are you talking about? Really, what are you talking about? We have lived in this place. In several parts of and here's the thing. Traditionally, Tamilians have been extremely welcoming of people with talent. The Tamil film industry, for the better part of it, was run even by Telugus, because Madras used to be the hub for everyone at that point. The icons that you have supported from MGR to everybody else, they have been non-Tamilians. So, Tamilians as a people are welcoming. But the political discourse of Tamil Nadu is narrow-minded, has positioned itself and pitted itself against the rest of Bharat to the extent that when a soldier of this country who comes back home or who comes from a different part of this country goes to Tamil Nadu, is lynched. This cannot happen. This is dangerous. Okay, let's assume for a moment this had happened in Punjab. What would all of us be saying? Oh, Khalistan is again on the rise. If this had happened to a soldier of this country at the hands of Khalistanis in Punjab, you would have said that Khalistanism is back.
No, Sai, it's happening in Karnataka also. Auto drivers who write out there, unless you speak in Kannada, I'm not going to. It's happening in many places.
I wouldn't agree with that, and there's a reason for this. Think about it this way. You go to Maharashtra or you go to Karnataka, what are they basically worried about? The loss of the culture of that land. That is a legitimate human sentiment across the board.
It happened in the 60s and things, lungis, they were called the South
I am
Indians.
not going to justify all the measures that were used to further this particular sentiment. Or when you say, lungi uthao, pungi bajao and all that, whatever they said, I don't agree with it. I'm not saying I agree with the means. But what are you looking at? If the very same sentiment were to be aired by someone from the Northeast or Assam, you'd immediately say, oh, there is some sense to it. Why don't Kannadigas get to say this? Why don't Telugus get to say this? Why don't Tamilians get to say this? I am not going to stand even for one bit to say that one Indian cannot visit another part of Bharat. One Bharatiya must have the right to visit every part of Bharat.
And buy property.
100%. Buy property, marry, settle. There cannot be any kind of restrictions there. However, what do they expect? You've come here, you lived for generations together. At least speak our language. You want an example? Recently at one of my public engagements there, members of the Jain community came and spoke. You talk, or rather you look at them, you will not feel that they are from any other part of the country
You're
except
talking
Tamil
about
Nadu.
Karnataka.
Karnataka as well as in Tamil Nadu.
Yeah.
The Marwadis of Tamil Nadu, you speak with them, they will speak Tamil. So they have embraced this because the nature of the Bharatiya basically is that he would want to embrace the local culture if he chooses to settle there. It's not as if we are itinerants going from one place to another without mingling with the local community at all. So the expectation that if you are here, at least pick up the language. When I was studying engineering, a lot of my friends were Maitais from Manipur. I can name them. I don't want to name them because of the circumstances today, but very dear friends. I don't want them to be affected because of their affiliation with me. They picked up Tamil within 4 years of education. So the insistence that first learn our language is not a wrong insistence. That is to ensure that you're not submerged in the deluge of globalization and this cosmopolitanism, because cosmopolitanism usually pits itself against the urge to preserve your culture and language. That is human.
Personally, I feel more languages you know in India, better it is for you.
100%. All
And
of us should be polyglots.
Agreed. Demystify this for me. What is Sanatana Dharma? What is Dharma? Because television channels today are all talking about that Dharma is a separate thing, Sanatana Dharma is a separate thing, Hinduism is a separate thing, Hindutva is a separate thing. We've already in our earlier podcast talked about
Distinction between Hinduism and Hindutva.
Hinduism and Hindutva. And for those who want to see the earlier podcast, you can. And in one of them, and I'm going to quote this, Sai has said, if Hinduism were living in peacetime, then Hindutva will sleep. But if that's not the case, Hinduism has to stand up. Hindutva has to stand up. And it is the Kshatriya aspect of Hinduism.
Right.
This is in the earlier podcast with J Sai Deepak. You can watch that. So now tell me, what is the difference between these, right? The Sanatana Dharma, Hinduism, Hindutva, are they linked at all?
See, it's like this. You have to take a look at the debates surrounding the definition of Hindu in the Constituent Assembly as to how they chose to group it all together, right? So, Hinduism under the Constitution is an agglomeration of multiple identities within. So, Jains, Buddhists, Sikhs are all seen as constitutionally Hindus.
It's a little odd, no?
Why?
Don't the Jains, the Jains don't
They
consider
would want
themselves a
to.
minority.
See, here's the thing. You can consider yourself a minority from the perspective of Section 20, or rather Article 29, as a cultural minority and still be part of Hinduism. Okay. There is no contradiction between the two. There's no conflict between the two positions. The important point is, if you look at the definition of Hinduism, one is what is the core of it. The Vedic religion is seen as the core of it. And if Vedic religion is seen as the core of it, Sanatana Dharma is the same as Vedic religion for all practical purposes. Now then you have other...
Isn't Sanatana Dharma from the Upanishads and...
Can that be outside the Vedic tradition when you speak of the
not.
Upanishads? It has to be.
Okay.
Upanishad is
Because
Vedanta.
the Arya Samaji say that is what separates them from
So that's what I'm coming to.
Okay.
So this is the core. From there, you're looking at the Buddhist offshoot. From there, you're looking at the Shramana or the Jain offshoot. The difference primarily being whether they treat Veda as the primary authority with respect to what is Dharma and on the path to the Supreme or the Brahman. Okay. The difference in these positions is what is the primary pramana or the primary proof or evidence. Okay. So the centrality or that particular faith system or that particular core which gives centrality to the Vedic position is the Vedic religion, and therefore that is seen as the Brahminical religion, so on and so forth. Other offshoots are also part of the larger dharmic fold, but which do not give centrality to the Vedas. That is our distinction of the Astika and the Nastika, not the atheist and the theist. Those who give centrality to Vedas are seen as the Astic, and those who don't are seen as the Nastika. Then...
Not of the book?
So not of the book.
Not
of this book. Correct.
When you're saying...
Correct.
Okay.
Then when you look at Arya Samajis, that is a relatively later movement of Swami Dayananda Saraswati.
It's a very... Brahmo Samaj,
correct.
Arya
So
Samaj,
each of these see themselves as part of the dharmic fold of the Hindu fold, but they may have differences of opinion with the... In fact...
The Bhakti movement,
Arya Samajis see themselves as followers of the Veda.
Yeah, correct.
But their position is, we stick to the Veda to such an extent that all other Vedic knowledge that has come out, let's say Agama Shastra, Jyotisha, whatnot, we reject that. So they are literalists when it comes to the interpretation of the Veda.
And the idols.
And the idols, right? They don't see themselves as Murti Pujaks. This is broadly the distinction. I'm here making an academic distinction. I have no interest in offending these sentiments because for me they are part of the Hindu fold.
Correct.
I may have disagreements with several of these sects as a practitioner of the Vedic faith, but nevertheless, I am not going to sit and offend these sentiments today because if you're a practitioner of the Hindu belief system, the idea is to make sure that you don't create fissures within the fold as much as possible. You have a conversation, but you try not to create fissures. Anyways, this is
It's an adhyatmic discussion anyway.
It
right?
is an
You can-
adhyatmic discussion,
Yeah.
right? And if you see some of the exchanges, these adhyatmic exchanges, the language actually gets fairly violent. Okay. In any case, I'll just come back to this. So when someone says Sanatana Dharma is not the same as Hinduism, that may be definitionally fine. But the fact is, Sanatana Dharma is the core of Hinduism. And therefore, under the law, even an insult to a part of the faith is an insult of the faith itself. So assume for a moment, I were to take pot shots at a particular group of a particular faith system. Will they not have the right to invoke the law, saying that these sentiments have been offended under a religious basket? Pentecostals can say something. The Seventh-day Methodists can say something. Each of them has the right to the same protection as a Christian would because they're all seen as being part of the Christian fold. So you don't get to say that they are so divergent. To say that one is not entirely the same as the other is to strike a distinction between the superset and the subset. Right? There's an umbrella, there's a smaller umbrella. But nevertheless, the smaller umbrella is within the bigger umbrella. And most importantly, in this case, Sanatana Dharma is the core of the Hindu faith system. Everybody else establishes their identity by distinguishing themselves from the core faith system because this is the yardstick, this is the norm, this is the benchmark.
So constitutionally, what is Hinduism and who is a Hindu? Because there are competing theories.
There
on
is no
this.
definition of a Hindu as to what makes a Hindu a Hindu. Who is a Hindu is identified. If you're a Sikh, this is based on self-identification in that particular sense. However, what are the principles of Hindu Dharma have been culled out and distilled in several judgments of the Supreme Court, citing works of Ramakrishna Mission and so on and so forth. There's a longish discussion that's been undertaken there. So what is a Hindu? One who believes in the concept of karma. One who believes in the concept of, therefore, reincarnation. One who believes in the context of, in the concept of Brahman, the supreme consciousness. There are some common precepts that the Supreme Court has actually identified as what constitutes a Hindu by definition.
But there might be Hindus who don't
There
believe
might
in it,
be.
but still you're a Hindu.
You're still a Hindu. So the larger definition is that if it is a faith system that is native to this land, it is seen as Hinduism. Otherwise, tribals, how would you call them Hindu? The definition, if these were the yardsticks and this is how you go about it, how do you then call tribals Hindus? The reason is they are native to this particular geography. Their faith system is native to this particular geography, which is why here is the enmeshing between the geographical aspect of the word Hindu and the religious aspect of the word Hindu. A faith system which has emanated from this land is largely within the broad fold of Hinduism. That would include animism. That would include several practices even in the Northeast. You have to ask this question, are Maitais Hindus or not? That will take us in a slightly different direction.
And all this will need to be absorbed when we talk about the UCC at some point of time.
100%. So again, in your city, that is Bangalore, sorry, your city would be Delhi.
Bangalore.
Okay.
Would be. Where would I start? I don't even know. Okay.
So I delivered a lecture recently, which was of course the subject of a controversy where before the lecture was even delivered, there is a nondescript group of leftist lawyers who basically said, how can you call him for a debate on this? He will not present a balanced picture. I presented both sides. And contrary to popular perception, I raised problems also with the concept of a UCC in light of severe diversity even within the Hindu fold. I have not taken a position pro or against. I've just said these are the multiple considerations that you have to take into account before you even arrive at a consensus, if at all it's even possible.
You really doubt that it's even possible? Why? Because of the diversities.
See, for a moment, even if I were to forget as to what rights others would lose, I'm interested only in what rights we lose. My simple question will be this. Hindus.
Okay.
Today we have the Hindu Succession Act, which remains the last remaining vestige of our cultural relationship with our past in terms of succession laws, matrimonial laws, so on and so forth. Will the UCC do away with the Hindu Succession Act and therefore the Mitakshara and the Dayabhaga systems which are entrenched as part of that Succession Act? Legitimate question to ask. Because the codification that you undertook in the 1950s did away with a lot of other systems. You decided that these are the only two systems. And that's effectively received knowledge from the colonial master. Any case, you resorted to this, you have now said this is the case. Do we stand to lose even these two remaining systems if this Hindu civil code, so to speak, were to be replaced with a uniform civil code? Now, is a uniform civil code a uniformly religious civil code, or is it a secular civil code? If it is a secular civil code, what will it draw its inspirations from? Questions to ask. I am not standing in the way of it. I am saying these are legitimate questions to ask. On the question of marriage, what is the position going to be drawn from? On the question of succession of property, what is the position going to be drawn from? Each of these questions, this is what you wish to address, right? Answer these questions.
There needs to be a debate.
There needs to be a debate.
Okay.
I am not going to stand in the way of a discussion on the topic, contrary to what the other side has said. Okay? They don't want this discussion ever, because every time you raise it, it is apparently anti-minority. That I am not in favor of. The conversation needs to start. But there also needs to be clarity in terms of the boundary conditions within which we operate.
Sai, first to come back to what we were discussing about Sanatana Dharma. Do you think that now Sanatana Dharma, the eradication of Sanatana Dharma, Hindutva, the whole thing is going to now dominate the conversation from 2023 second half to 2024 elections? Is it going to become so putrid now that that religion is going to be dragged in, and that's going to set the benchmark about how the discourse is going to be till 2024?
Everything that makes Bharat Bharat will be called into question. And India, this coalition, in my assessment, is going to adopt a scorched earth policy to burn everything that we hold dear in its bid to gain power.
And you are an supposedly apolitical person, or you don't prescribe to anyone?
Every Indian is a political person.
Okay.
I am not associated with a political organization.
All right.
Period. I will not speak for any political organization. If I speak for a political organization, it will be on a particular issue. Mine will be an issue-based approach.
Okay.
If there's a happy coincidence between a position that I hold dear, which I believe is good for Bharatiya civilization, whoever endorses that position, I will vote for them. Period.
Right.
It's unfortunate that we don't have too many takers. So it's for the Congress to ask, what has it done wrong?
So you think that this is a healthy conversation or unhealthy to bring this out in the open now?
It's an inevitable conversation.
Inevitable.
100%. I am not going to sit and judge on whether it's good or bad. I think it's inevitable because they have revealed their cards finally. The end game of Dravidianism was always destruction of Hinduism. When they strike, so what did they start with? No, we want to destroy only Brahmanism, not Hinduism. Now they're saying we will destroy only Sanatana Dharma, not Hinduism. How far is it from here to destruction of Hinduism? That's what you started off initially.
Sai, there are many people on social media, and what you said also, which is that garlanding of idols with chappals, right? Now, this is something which in the north, it was talked about when it was happening in UP, Bihar and all that. When it was being talked about, the media reported it. But the statements which were made in Tamil Nadu, not much reporting was done in the national media as such.
Language barrier.
So now they're
Tyranny
saying,
of distance.
from Delhi or from the Noida channels, as they say now.
Possibly.
So now that the speeches are being translated, and now that mainstream media, national media is covering it, it's coming out in the open.
Correct.
They're saying that it was something which was not hidden, which there are two views. One is that what Udaynidhi has said today was spoken in whispers by Stalin and by Karunanidhi, his father and grandfather. That's
Correct.
one view.
Correct.
The second view was, no, it was not said in whispers. It was said in the open. It was just not translated by English media.
So the ideologues always were blunt and clear about it. So for instance, Mr. Veeramani, who is the current head of the DK, has always been consistently and virulently anti-Hindu, anti-Sanatana Dharma in every form possible. So they wouldn't resort to any kind of airbrushing or pixelation. But politicians would be careful about it because they wouldn't want to hurt sentiments beyond a point in the interest of securing power. So when the time is right, they would start speaking about it. Now, this gentleman obviously made us, he gave a speech, Udaynidhi, from the precincts of Don Bosco. And he was emboldened to actually issue quite a few things in that particular speech, which preceded this eradication conference, or Sanatana Dharma eradication conference. People should watch it, but most people don't understand Tamil. So at least learn Tamil just to understand what anti-Hindu nonsense is being spewed there. Let me also just clarify, this is crucial. Tamilians are not anti-Hindus by default. So don't make that mistake. Don't equate Tamil pride with anti-Hinduism. Because there is also a serious rise of Hindu consciousness in Tamil Nadu. Let's not forget the number of temples in that place, 38,000 and more. There are still people who throng those temples. And it's not as if it's only by tourists. Tamil Hindus do it. The Tamil Hindu sentiment is so strong in Singapore, in Malaysia, and the expats. On a regular basis, I get letters and emails from 3 sets of Tamils. Sri Lankan Tamils from London, all Hindus, practicing Hindus who are proud of their faith systems, and Tamils from Malaysia and Singapore. All of them saying, what is wrong with the political discourse in Tamil Nadu? Because you see, Tamil Hindus in Malaysia are bearing the brunt for being a minority and a Hindu minority, where conversions and forced conversions are on the rise. Even dead bodies are converted. Death certificates are issued only if they have converted to the majority religion of Malaysia. So they know what they're going through. And therefore, they are acutely aware of the serious, disastrous consequences of going down the path of Dravidianism. So those who wish to indulge in this conversation, please do not start with Tamil hatred or Tamilian hatred. This is a very important caveat. Strike a distinction between the Tamil identity and Dravidinist ideology. The villain here and the cancer here is the Dravidinist ideology. Please learn to focus your attention on these aspects. Otherwise, you will fuel another round of North-South divide, which is seriously problematic for where Bharat stands today. Don't indulge in this. That's what I would say.
Are you fearful of that North-South divide?
I would say that if Dravidianism goes unchecked and it does not get the pushback that it's supposed to from the state itself, from within the state itself, then they will fuel it further. And I genuinely hope that all of the political forces in the state of Tamil Nadu who want to see Tamil Nadu prosper as part of Bharat and tie and ensure that its destinies are tied to that of Bharat, they should not let this succeed under any circumstances. I would say the Congress, at least in Tamil Nadu, should speak up.
Speak up how? They are speaking in favor.
It's unfortunate. I mean, considering the tradition that they have inherited through Rajaji and others and the position that they've taken now, I'm sorry, I take back what I said. I have no expectations from the Congress.
But what about there was a statement I just heard from D. Raja, and he said that it's anti-Marx also. Is anti-Marx comments are also made by the BJP when they go to Tamil Nadu, just like they make anti-Dravid remarks. So anti-Sanatan, anti-Marx, So there is a getting together of...
So why don't we suspend the application of Section 295A and 153 altogether to the state of Tamil Nadu? Let it be a free-for-all. Do it. Let the state government say we don't want the application of these penal provisions to this land because we are the land of free speech and equality and social justice and egalitarianism. Go ahead, do it. Will you do it?
Is healthy conversation possible? Healthy debate possible?
It's possible nowhere anymore.
No.
A debate is not possible. A conversation is not possible. It's a slugfest out and out. And it's unfortunate that for you to be heard, you need to be the loudest. That is the unfortunate reality. And that's not something that's peculiar to Bharat anymore. Political atmosphere across the world is vitiated between the left and the right. But the hope is that at least sane voices emerge from this utterly chaotic din. And the people are given some kind of material, if not a sense of direction, because for you to give a sense of direction could be seen as condescending and patronizing because everybody's an adult, at least the voting population. Give them the material, let them form an opinion. Let's translate the entire Dravidinist literature and make it available across the country. Let this poisonous tree defend itself against the rising tide of Bharatiya consciousness from Kashmir to Kanyakumari. Let it do it.
Is there a rising consciousness? Do you feel that that consciousness is strong enough to have this debate at this stage?
Here's my first-hand experience based on my interactions with the student population and other age groups across the country. They are sick and tired of this anti-Hindu nonsense. The kind of reception that I got for this UCC lecture, the size of the hall was around 450. Sorry, I'm not tooting my own horn here. I'm just telling you.
No, I saw the pictures where people from the windows were peering in.
This is not about a person. This is more about their utter frustration that people use the native spirit of this land as the softest possible punching bag, as human doormats, as cultural doormats. This is a preparation for grounds of a future bloodbath, thanks to the kind of statement that he's issued. When you say that I didn't call for extermination of people, I only called for extermination of the ideology. So those who follow the ideology, what are they supposed to do? Give up or die? These are the only two
What
options.
they're saying is that when somebody says garibi hatao, it doesn't mean garib hatao.
Right.
It means getting rid of poverty. So when you say...
So is Hinduism poverty, intellectual property, or religious poverty?
No, you're now going very literal, right?
No,
When
so let's ask ourselves this question. If I am an adherent and a practitioner of Sanatana Dharma, I am being told we will eradicate this. So what are you going to eradicate? All those institutions and infrastructure which represent this faith system. So temples? Do they represent Sanatana Dharma or not? Of course they do. What will you do then? So temples, festivals. So children will be bullied in schools. That used to happen during the peak of the Dravidian movement. You'd find it very difficult to walk on the streets, regardless of the gender. This is the second massive wave of anti-Brahmanism.
now,
Yes. It started with attacks on educational institutions which were seen as as being Brahminical. So the politicians of the Dravidianist ideology would insist on their children being educated in Brahminical institutions and schools in Tamil Nadu. Their children would study in those schools. But for political reasons, that school would be subjected to attacks.
but they don't even, like we were talking about Jaishankar or Nirmala, if they want to contest election. So politically, they have no voice. So why go against them now?
Because it provides a fantastic political rallying point. Hatred of a particular community which is completely disenfranchised in that particular state brings all the bile out. And it gives you... So if you're not able to give something positive to rally people together and your governance is in shambles, Tamil Nadu is capable of a lot more. And the utter corruption that it has witnessed over the last few years, this is not a political statement, this is a statement as a citizen. I don't need to be a stooge of any political party to comment on these aspects. Chennai used to be the intellectual capital of the country, along with Calcutta. Look at the respective positions today. Industrial development, frankly speaking, they are still living on the currency of their past glory. On the aspect of education, you have ensured that the brilliant students of Tamil Nadu cannot compete with others by pampering a certain sense of exclusionism when it comes to medical entrance examinations, all India entrance examinations.
Neat.
Yes. You're saying that our students cannot compete with the West because our state syllabi is different and the central syllabi is different. This is an Aryan conspiracy. Is this the kind of nonsense that you actually peddle? You hope to compete with China when you're actually making sure that students cannot even compete with people outside of Tamil Nadu? So many people from Tamil Nadu come out and work in Maharashtra, in Nagpur, in so many other places. And regardless of caste differences, they end up learning that language and then they realize what they have suffered thanks to these politically imposed handicaps which are language based. I'm not saying everybody should learn Hindi, but at least have the common sense to learn the language if you want larger opportunities in this whole country. In this big country, if you want to go to some other part of the state or let's say the country, you need to know the language. You're telling me that it's going to be possible for you to survive with Tamil with the knowledge of Tamil alone in other parts of the country? That's not going to be possible. I'll tell you the stupidity of even the pop culture there. Tamil hero goes to Pakistan, speaks in Tamil, and the Pakistani Muslim speaks in Tamil.
But the movies are fabulous. And I know that thanks to now the OTT, there are so many North Indians who are watching South Indian films, including Tamil films, because you can, dub it or you can watch it in other languages. So I just hope maybe the next podcast we'll do in Tamil and in Hindi.
You should. You should.
We will be able
It's time for this content to go beyond Hindi and English.
beyond Hindi and English,
Yes.
right? So we will do in
You can't have a Delhi club.
We will do in multiple languages. We probably have... you should be part of actually that other group that I have where we
Sunday
have...
Breakfast Club.
where we have... we have Anand, Ranganathan, and we have Abhijit Iyer Mitra, and we have Sushant Sareen. So we have a Punjabi.
I don't know if I'll get access to that group.
We have Tamil. We have discussions.
Anand is a dear friend, of course.
Yeah. So we have discussions in all these languages. We discussed you too in one of them where we talked. Right. So we were talking about that. But anyway, it's been fabulous talking to you.
Thank you.
And I look forward to having you back on the show soon.
Thank
you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching this edition of ANI Podcast with Smita Prakash. Do write in to us with your suggestions. Do like or subscribe on whichever channel you have seen this or heard this. Namaste. Jai Hind. Click here to watch the previous episodes.